That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, we are going to do something a little bit different for this video. So, you know, during the offseason, you're going to see a lot of drafts where I can actually go through and I can show you all the draft board as we go through and we do a live draft. That way I can go and give you my real reaction time analysis. I mean, y'all got to see this with our Dynasty startup draft just a couple days ago, but we can't do that right now because we are way too early to the party. We are going to get a 2022 Dynasty rookie mock draft going, but because, I mean, Sleeper or really any other fantasy football platform you're looking at, they don't have the 2022 rookies loaded up onto their platform just yet. I actually had to do this through Patreon. Of course, Patreon will be through where all our mock drafts are, all our real Dynasty leagues at the same time. We have our Dynasty rankings there. That's where our Dynasty rookie draft guide will come out at the same time. You can find all of that in the description of the video. But nonetheless, I'm apologizing that y'all don't get to see a draft board right now, but we will go through and I'll recap pick by pick the first round of our 2022 Dynasty rookie mock draft. And of course, if you have not done so already, please go down there, drop a like on the video, leave a comment letting us know how stupid we are and what we got wrong in this mock draft, and also subscribe to the channel, but only if, and I repeat, only if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. If you don't play Dynasty or don't want to play Dynasty and you're just a regular fantasy football player, this channel's not for you. You can watch the video. Don't subscribe, please. I promise you, you're only going to find Dynasty content on this channel. And yeah, that should be it. Let's go through and let's dive into this list. And let's start it off with the 101 who was selected by yours truly. Now, this is going to be a super flex league, but I mean, full transparency, the quarterback position this year is not like how it was last season or the season before that. You're not going to get a quarterback drafted just at the guaranteed first pick overall. You don't have a Kyler Murray or a Trevor Lawrence in this draft class. So instead, I was in a little bit of a different scenario. And of course, we are going to get so much more information coming out as the offseason progresses. But for now, I decided to go with Isaiah Spiller. Now, not sitting here and saying Isaiah Spiller is the same level of prospect as an Ezekiel Elliott, as a Saquon Barkley, those truly generational rookies coming into the NFL. You can, of course, throw 2,000 yards season after season after season. Jonathan Taylor from Wisconsin onto that elite prospect list. Isaiah Spiller is not that kind of guy. And I think there are a decent amount of wide receivers you can make an argument for here, and as well, maybe a quarterback. Now, the reason that I decided to go with Isaiah Spiller is simply because, I mean, this trend has continued to show that it is the best thing you can do in Dynasty. We talked about this last year within your rookie drafts. What you want to be doing is investing into 3 down rookie running backs that should have an immediate role on their team their rookie season. In 2021, those players were Najee Harris, Javonte Williams, Travis Etienne. Those were the 3 guys you were pegging down. Now, of course, you ended up getting Michael Carter thrown onto that list. Back in 2020, there was a list of 5 running backs. You had Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, Cam Akers, DeAndre Swift. And I guess you could throw A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon didn't really fit that mold, but nonetheless, those running backs that are coming in and have a 3-down profile that should see immediate opportunity in the NFL are going to be the perfect investments that you can make in your Dynasty rookie drafts. And the reason for that is quite simple. I mean, the perfect example is Najee Harris versus Kyle Pitts. At the beginning of your draft last year in a Dynasty Superflex tight end premium league, I was of the opinion that people were making a massive mistake in drafting Kyle Pitts over Najee Harris, and that if you look at the investment into a Najee Harris or into a player like Javonte Williams, you know that their rookie season, based on historical hit rates for rookie running backs, they're going to have a much better shot at actually making an immediate impact into your starting lineup, where you can go through and start that player, expect high-end production in return, and get that immediate production in not holding a roster clogger down there on your bench. Now, not only are you getting that immediate production from your rookie pick, but more importantly, when those rookie running backs come into the NFL and they produce right away, you actually get just an exponential growth in their dynasty value. I mean, look at the past few years. Look at the people investing into Javonte Williams, into Jonathan Taylor. Those running backs are so much more predictable than wide receivers. I mean, running backs, it's very simple. What you need to find: NFL opportunity, which is just indicated by draft capital, size, speed, and receiving down capability. I believe that Isaiah Spiller should check all 4 of those boxes. I think he will go in the beginning of the 2nd round of the NFL draft class. Now, of course, we need to be going through and just monitoring what we get from his official size and testing measurables, but we should get that at the NFL Combine a little later this offseason. And now, speaking of checking all these boxes, let's go down to the 102. Richard over there on Patreon decided to make this selection, and he went with Breece Hall here at the 102. Now, I will say, I don't know what to think of this pick. In full transparency, we talked about this in our running back rankings video. With Breece Hall, I think that he checks the majority of the boxes that we're looking for. Like going through, I mean, this was the running back 1 in a lot of Devy players' minds just an offseason ago. And then this season, he came out, had a very fine year. Like, it's funny to see that most people had him as the running back 1 last year. I mean, even NFL mock drafters were drafting him as the running back 1 a year out. And he comes out as a 20-year-old at Iowa State, and he has 253 rushing attempts, 1,400 rushing yards, and he has, I mean, 36 receptions, his best season ever catching the football. Now, what's weird about this is, I mean, if you look at just the NFL draft community, right now, they've actually pushed Breece Hall down. They pushed Breece Hall down to being a 3rd round NFL draft pick and going behind some of these other players we're going to be talking about in a second at the running back position, going behind guys like, I mean, Kenneth Walker. I don't know exactly what to make of that. For that reason, I'm going to be a little bit more hesitant to go through and just automatically invest into Breece Hall. But I mean, in my opinion, he looks like a 3-down running back that has proven that he can catch the football. We have him ranked near the very top of this draft class at the running back position. So I'm fine with it at the 102, but I'm telling you right now, he's not going to be going this high in your own Dynasty rookie draft. I would imagine that he's closer to the middle of the 1st round. And our next running back, I mean, just starting it off with 3 running backs off the rip here, Kenneth Walker at the 103. Now, I think that when it just is all over with, Kenneth Walker is most likely going to be going ahead of Breece Hall in Dynasty rookie drafts. He should go ahead of him in the NFL draft with the way things are currently projected. I'm going to be a little bit hesitant to go along with that. The reason for it is, I mean, Breece Hall simply almost had triple the amount of receptions that Kenneth Walker had in their final seasons at respectively Michigan State and Iowa State. So it looks like Breece Hall may be a little bit of a better pass catching running back here, but obviously Kenneth Walker, he should have the draft capital. I'm interested to know what y'all would think of him as a receiving down running back. The college target share wasn't fantastic. I want this season to officially end. That way we can see where he stacks up and getting that minimum threshold that we historically look for at an 8.5% team college target share from these running backs going into the NFL. But it looks like the one hole that he may have is the receiving down capability. And now our next player, I mean, going to be Treylon Burks here. JN takes him at the 104. With Treylon Burks, obviously this is a dominant wide receiver. He is my wide receiver 1 in the draft class. I mean, usually these guys that are prototypical alpha size, I mean, they're coming out here, they're looking like monsters. Usually the Dynasty Fantasy Football community gets a little bit too excited about them because you can see them on the field. You see the fact that he is 6'3", 225 pounds, and he looks every bit of it, and you just want to get excited. What I'm more excited about is I'm more excited about the age-adjusted production, which he's had. He's been a significant member of this Arkansas offense since his freshman season. And a big thing is, if you're looking at this final year where he averages about 90 receiving yards a game, has a true junior here, that isn't that impressive. Like if you were going to compare it to someone in the Big 12, compare it into a high volume offense, then sure, you're like, okay, well, that's not a great prospect profile, but this is why you don't just look at raw numbers. This is why you have to look at the market share numbers for his respective offense, because we know college football, I mean, the environments that these guys play in, they're just drastically different. And this Arkansas passing offense, I mean, not a strong passing offense to say the least. Yeah, yes, you only had 1,100 receiving yards coming from Treylon Burks, but this passing offense, I mean, only averaged 223 passing yards a game. So he was closing in on over 40% of his team's receiving yards on a per game basis. That's massive. That shows that he is an alpha wide receiver. He was an alpha wide receiver at a young age at an SEC school. I'll say, of course, don't really like what he did to us. I mean, hook 'em horns, but nonetheless, I mean, it's going to be fine here. I think we can have him as the wide receiver 1. And now we are going to have our first quarterback off the board. Doug came out and decided to take Matt Corral. Now, here Matt Corral looks like he projects to be the first quarterback in the NFL draft, going over to NFL mock draft database.com. They actually go through and they compile a bunch of different mock drafts that you find all across the internet. And of course, this isn't nearly as important as what we'll be looking at in a couple months when we have way more actual data points. This is a way too early mock draft here. But currently, he's projected to be the 7th pick going around the Atlanta Falcons. And obviously, I mean, I don't know if I have to say obviously here, maybe not too many people know this, but I mean, if you go through and if you look at our Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide, where we did in-depth analysis over the past 20 years, there's a big time difference between those quarterbacks that go at picks 8, 9, and 10, and those quarterbacks that go at picks 1, 2, and 3. It doesn't seem like it should be, but there is, especially when it comes to their NFL job security. The perfect example is when you get a quarterback that is clearly bad, especially this matters for a Superflex league. You get a quarterback that is clearly bad, but we need to see how long they can hold on to that starting job. Now with Zach Wilson, he goes with the 2nd pick this past year. Now I can guarantee you that Zach Wilson, he is going to be the starting quarterback for the New York Jets in 2022. Because he got that top 3 pick NFL draft capital, which historically speaking, going back to players like Mitchell Trubisky, Blake Bortles, they've been able to hold on to jobs as starting NFL quarterbacks for at the minimum 4 years, regardless of how bad they looked. Now, the exact opposite end of that spectrum is when you get closer to being picks 10, 11, 12, there you have to be productive right away. There you have to show some flashes at the NFL level, or you could risk the potential of turning into the next Josh Rosen, of the next Dwayne Haskins. Now, I don't want to make the argument that Blake Bortles and Mitchell Trubisky are that much better than Josh Rosen and Dwayne Haskins, but what was the difference between these two guys? The difference is, I mean, on one end of the spectrum, when those quarterbacks have the pedigree and when they have the team investment of a top 3 draft pick, I mean, they actually have the long shelf life where they're guaranteed to be at least having shot after shot after shot to prove that they have something. Where the issue is with the team like Matt Corral, maybe say he goes to the Atlanta Falcons, around pick 10, and then all of a sudden the following season, I mean, he didn't really show anything his rookie year and they have another top 5 draft pick. They're going to be willing to go through and decide to just take another shot at a new rookie quarterback. And I'm not saying that's a guarantee, but I am saying that if Matt Corral was to go at the 1st overall pick in the NFL draft, he should go with the 1st overall pick in your Dynasty rookie draft. I mean, obviously he's the same player at one end of the spectrum than the other, but just the draft capital actually matters so much more at the quarterback position than people want to give it credit for. So I know we went on a little bit of a tangent here. So I just really want to be putting out the little asterisks. Yes, you have your first quarterback going off the board here a little bit later than you're used to compared to the past few years in Dynasty Fantasy Football, but it's because you don't have that Trevor Lawrence level player. Trevor Lawrence, another great example. Yeah, he had a bad rookie season. They're going to replace the coach. And they're going to go through and give Trevor Lawrence season after season after season after season. He can't be bad, but you can still start him as your quarterback too in a Superflex league. Now, going over to our next pick, we're going to have Garrett Wilson at the 106. And here with Garrett Wilson, I think a lot of people want to make an argument to have him as wide receiver 1, which is fair to say. I mean, with Wilson, he comes out and he replaces a very good wide receiver at Ohio State as the wide receiver 1, where, I mean, a lot of people thought Chris was going to be able to come through and still be able to be the wide receiver 1 over Garrett this past season at Ohio State. Chris actually stays for his 4th year, so you'd imagine that the true senior would be able to outproduce the true junior. While it doesn't happen, Garrett Wilson does come out. He is the wide receiver 1 for Ohio State this past year. He had significant target competition in this offense, which goes without saying. So the market share numbers are going to look a little thrown off, but that's because of the target competition that he had at Ohio State. He's an elite level wide receiver, should go in the middle of the round 1 of the NFL draft, should go in the middle of round 1 for your Dynasty Superflex draft. And now our next guy coming out of UNC, I'm sorry, not UNC, that's the quarterback afterwards, coming out of USC, Drake London, obviously coming off a significant injury here. The story with Drake London is the size as well as the rookie season production. He breaks out right away at 18 years old at USC. And this was a team that not only had Amon-Ra St. Brown, who y'all remember got drafted to the Detroit Lions out of USC in the 4th round last year, but they also had Michael Pittman, who didn't get drafted until 2019. So with Drake London, he came out and he had almost, I mean, if I can do some simple math here, maybe 60 receiving yards a game. Let me do some official math. Let's divide 570 by 8 really quick so we can see exactly how many receiving yards per game he had. He actually had 71 receiving yards per game in a context of an offense that has Michael Pittman and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So to be able to come in and do that immediately, very, very impressive here. Not to mention his final season at USC, he actually averages over 100 receiving yards a game. He is currently projected to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft, and he's 6'5". A lot of people want to compare him to Mike Evans. I will say Mike Evans was a much better prospect going into that 2014 NFL draft class. Now, yes, they're a similar size. Mike Evans was legitimately one of the best prospects that you were going to find at the wide receiver position, like everybody was in that 2014 draft class. By far and away, my favorite draft class ever, my first year getting into Dynasty fantasy football. But nonetheless, I mean, here with Drake London, yeah, he's a very safe option as your wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 off the board here. And now our next guy is going to be Sam Howell at the 108. Now, this was the quarterback that most people, including myself last offseason, thought would be the quarterback 1 off the board this year. I mean, some people thought it was Spencer Rattler. I was on the same Howell trend. But the reason for that is because with Sam Howell, I mean, he was fantastic as a true sophomore. I mean, at UNC now, please keep in mind, there were a decent amount of talented players at UNC. Not sure if you've heard of a kid named Javonte Williams, of someone named Michael Carter, of someone named Diami Brown. All these players actually left North Carolina in 2020 to go into the NFL. So, I mean, a little bit of a different scenario from 2022, 2021 for Sam Howell, where you actually saw the adjusted yards per attempt. I mean, for Sam Howell go from 10.3 to 8.7 his true junior year. And because of so, at least I'm imagining that's why you've seen this fall in his projected NFL draft capital. Right now, he's projected to go in the late first rather than when, I mean, we were just an offseason ago, he was projected to be the first or the second pick off the board by the majority of people making NFL mock drafts. So obviously you hate to see the fact that he does have that fall in perception. I think he's fine. I would prefer a couple other quarterbacks. Like, we'll get to them at the end of the video, but our next guy will be a wide receiver, David Bell out of Purdue. With David Bell, I know a lot of people want to focus in on the fact that Rondale Moore was at Purdue at the same time. When they were at Purdue together, I mean, Rondale Moore was not healthy at all. Rondale Moore essentially played his true freshman season, his sophomore year, his junior year. He was injured throughout the entire thing. So it doesn't really matter that he was there with David Bell because David Bell was operating as the wide receiver 1 for Purdue. And he was very good while doing so. I mean, he actually came out and he was productive right away. Like I said, no, Rondale Moore technically on the roster. Rondale Moore wasn't playing though, so please don't read into that. But he did see 1,000 receiving yards as a true freshman here at Purdue. I mean, this is a player that also comes out, I mean, averages over 100 receiving yards a game his final season there as well, and also his second year. Now, if you're looking at his size, it's going to be 6'2", 205 pounds. Maybe you can just make an argument for the target competition. I don't really care. I think you can be excited about him. Now, one thing that I want to mention and the difference between someone like Bell and at the same time Treylon Burks is, I mean, here with David Bell, like, yes, you can be excited with the fact that he averages over 100 receiving yards a game, but it's not nearly as impressive in the context of this Purdue offense, where you're looking at this Purdue offense and they were able to average, instead of the Arkansas 220 passing yards a game, here they were actually able to come out and average 340 passing yards a game. So the market share numbers aren't nearly as impressive as what you would be looking at with someone like Treylon Burks, who we were talking about at the beginning of this video. And that's why it's so important to be checking in on the context of the offense that these guys were playing in, because it's just wildly different school to school. And now our next pick is going to be Malik Willis at the 110. Now, Malik Willis is going to break that mold for us. Y'all know I am not a fan of investing into those quarterbacks that go in the late first, the early second of the NFL draft, unless they have league-breaking upside with their rushing production. And that's what Malik Willis has. I mean, to pull up what he has done, I mean, over the past 2 seasons now, he's been able to come out and, I mean, have very impressive years as a rushing quarterback primarily. Now, of course, that's not all he is, but I mean, I want to say that's the strength of his. He did transfer from Auburn going into 2020, that he actually was able to come out and average over, not average, he had over 900 rushing yards as a true junior. As a true junior, 900 rushing yards, over 90 rushing yards a game. And remember, in college, sacks are negative rushing yards. So I don't have it in front of me how many sacks he was taking, but I would imagine he actually averaged over 100 rushing yards, and he had some of that taken away based on sacks as well. And then something similar, I mean, his final season there, he also just was a fantastic rushing quarterback. And we've seen this with someone like Jalen Hurts. You've seen this with someone like Lamar Jackson. I'm not going to compare him to Lamar because obviously Lamar is an extreme outlier. Jalen Hurts, however, I think is a fair comparison, where I was fine drafting Jalen Hurts in the second round a couple years ago. I mean, my favorite draft picks in that class were in the beginning of the third round of Dynasty rookie drafts going Jalen Hurts, and at the same time going A.J. Dillon. Now, the reason we were taking Jalen Hurts there is because we were saying, well, yes, he doesn't have the job security that we were discussing with a player that's drafted in the top 3. We don't know if he is going to start, but what we do know is if he does start in the NFL, he's going to be someone we can automatically go through and put in our starting lineup. You couldn't say the same thing with some of those other players. I mean, the perfect example is go look at Baker Mayfield, someone that does have the job security, but I mean, he's never going to give you anything with that because he's not going to rush the ball at all. And at the same time, he's really not going to be able to have a significant passing advantage over the rest of the field. So, I mean, there you're looking at a low floor, low ceiling quarterback. Malik Willis, going to be a wide range of outcomes. Like, I don't think you should be surprised if this is someone that you only get to see start 5 NFL games. Right now, he's projected to go in the first round. Obviously, we have a long way to go with this, but you shouldn't be surprised if he doesn't have a long NFL career. But every game he does start, if he can get to 60 rushing yards a game, he can be a quarterback 1 in fantasy. Because if he can get to 60 rushing yards per game, like, let's just do some simple math here. What does 60 rushing yards a game look like in terms of passing yards? If you're able to go through and let's say the mark is getting to 9 fantasy points per game as a rusher, I mean, including rushing touchdowns, which is a completely fair assessment to get to. That's what Jalen Hurts is essentially adding on, just 9 fantasy points based on the rushing department alone. If you're changing that over to passing yards, that's getting to almost 225 passing yards a game added on to whatever you have as a passer. So that's why those rushing quarterbacks in fantasy football are such a cheat code. That's why Malik Willis, I am going to be completely fine taking the end of the first. And now our next draft pick here will be Kenny Pickett at the 111. Now, he, on the other hand, is looking like he should go ahead of Malik Willis in the NFL draft, according to right now. I mean, I believe this website is NFLmockdraftdatabase.com. But the reason I'm going to be a little bit more excited about Malik Willis is because that rushing upside. It's not like you're going to have Pickett coming out and being a top 5 NFL quarterback. He should be a mid-round 1 selection. So I would actually definitely just prefer the guy that does have the elite level ceiling as a rusher. And then our last pick is going to be another running back coming out of UCLA, Zach Charbon. And here, I mean, a running back that should check every single box. He actually was a 4-star prospect coming in to college as well. I mean, he comes out, looks like he should have the size, looks like he should get the NFL draft capital of being a day 2 selection at the same time. That's really what you're looking for with those running backs. You want to see them go in day 2. And he did have 24 receptions in 12 games his final season as well at UCLA. Obviously transferred to so many players in this draft class, which is just so weird to be looking at this day and age. But nonetheless, I think you're going to be completely fine taking him at the 112. And yeah, that's all I got for you. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have not done so already, please go down there, drop that like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. And of course, you know, I'll be bringing Dynasty Fantasy Football videos every single day once we get to this offseason. So make sure you're subscribed, hit that bell. Only if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football, you can get in our next mock draft. You can get into a real Dynasty League with us over there on Patreon. You can find the link in the description of the video or in the comment section. Thank you. I hope you have a great day, and I hope to see you out with the video tomorrow.